They're wondering about if you take out your driver's license and if you got a little yellow star up on the right-hand corner, means you've already got your real ID in place. That's all you need to be able to go in and vote.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. That was Republican Senator Mike Rounds making the case for yellow stars on IDs. Where in history have we seen that before? I'm not calling Mike Rounds an anti-Semite, but at the very least, his comment betrays a deep ignorance of the historical significance of that symbol. For what it's worth, the real ID star on driver's licenses is not yellow. But the larger issue here is the demand by Republicans to pass federal legislation that would make it harder to vote because of specious claims of widespread election malfeasance. That kind of voter fraud isn't a thing that happens in America. We'll get into that in a minute. But the fear-mongering over this issue by Republicans works. And it works because Republicans have found a way to tie it to, you guessed it, immigration. Name just about any issue that they're losing on, cost of living, crime rates, voting rights. They will always try to find an immigrant to scapegoat. I asked Chris Goldsmith to join me to unpack all this. Chris is an Army vet and the founder of Vets Fighting Fascism. Here's our conversation. Chris, welcome to the show. It feels like we have jumped straight past show me your papers to yellow stars. And maybe this was a slip of the tongue. It probably was a slip of the tongue, but you don't say yellow stars on your documents unless it's in the back of your head.
This is building off of a decade of conspiracy theories promoted by Donald Trump and those around him. Back to the first election that he won, he believed that millions of undocumented immigrants voted illegally in California. Right. He put political capital into this. He hired Chris Kobach to do an investigation that, as far as I know, never actually happened. So because none of the conspiracy theory stuff has worked yet, they're trying to pass the SAVE Act or the Save America Act, which would make it so that any woman who's been married and changed her name but hasn't updated her documents accordingly wouldn't be able to vote. Right. They are trying to disenfranchise as many people as they can. And I think that Mike Rounds having this yellow star idea in his head as he was trying to explain the rationale behind this bullshit is pretty telling. He understands that he's trying to classify Americans as real Americans, the ones who support him and his party, and those who are not real Americans. And that is not what you or I fought for when we raised our right hands.
You have that actual language now being offered by administration officials. Kristi Noem talked about making sure the right people vote for the right candidate.
When it gets to election day, that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country.
The Secretary of Homeland Security threatening people's right to vote if they're not voting for the right candidate. These aren't just fringe figures. These are cabinet secretaries talking about making sure Americans vote for the right people.
The entire plan that Stephen Miller has for ICE is to use them as an intimidation force against voters from the primaries to the general election this year. They've been talking, Mike Flynn and Kash Patel, who, Kash Patel is now the FBI director. They've been talking about doing things like seizing ballots using the military. This is their QAnon fever dream that they've been stuck on for almost half a decade or longer than half a decade now. So I think that Democrat-run states and states where people still care about democracy, as the Republicans in Georgia do and did when they stopped Trump from trying to steal the 2020 election, they need to start passing laws that makes it so that local law enforcement does not tolerate the things that happened in 2020 or does not tolerate ICE being, at or near polling stations under any circumstances. What I anticipate happening after the elections is Donald Trump will try to seize ballots, whether it's using the military or ICE, or calling in his friends, the Constitutional Sheriff's Association, or other unlawful militias. And that's what states need to start preparing for now. There needs to be laws passed that make it absolutely crystal clear that law enforcement must intervene.
Well, we don't need to anticipate Donald Trump seizing ballots. He just did it in Georgia at the Fulton County Elections Office. Granted, it wasn't during a recount. It was, at least the word inside D.C., it was an attempt to mollify or feed his conspiracy theories about 2020. But it also feels like it might have been a practice run. Seizing ballots using the intelligence services, the director of national intelligence herself was there. It doesn't seem to be entirely backward looking. It felt like a dry run.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that. This is the way that Donald Trump desensitizes people to his extreme behavior. Is he takes a step over the line and takes a step over the line, and before you know it, the line that you originally drew is 10 miles back that way. And Donald Trump, using the FBI to go in to seize Fulton County ballots, it is going to make his audience expect and want this kind of, to demand this kind of thing happening. So, Director Tulsi Gabbard's involvement in this, I think, goes to show how integral to this administration and its top leadership these conspiracy theories are. Under no circumstance does the DNI go on an FBI raid. Like that is not something I think has ever happened before. The only reason that it happened is because this administration is running not to produce outcomes, but to produce content. They want to tell a story. They want to tell lies to keep their cult, frothing and wanting for real election interference.
It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new coming to the Midas Touch Network. Midas Defense, serious coverage of the military, national security, and real threats at home and abroad. No spin, no talking points, just expert voices and on-the-ground reporting. Check out Midas Defense, coming soon to the Midas Touch Network. We had a former covert CIA operative on the show week before last. I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes, but her damning indictment of the DNI's decision to go down to Georgia and just how unprecedented that was is a must watch. I think we'd be remiss, Chris, if we didn't point out that the underlying premise of all of this election paranoia and conspiracy theorizing is entirely manufactured. I've got this stat in front of me right here about the Heritage Foundation's own research into election fraud and its findings that in 24 years of voting, only 77 illegals voted, representing, I can't even do the decimal points, 0.0000764% of all votes. It's not a thing that happens. Utah, this is just off the top of my head, but Utah did its own assessment, I think, of the 2020 election, 2.1 million registered voters. They found one instance of a non-citizen who was registered and did not vote. Like, this is not a problem in American elections. It is a canard. It is a manufactured crisis, and yet it still drives Trump's base crazy. This idea that illegals are flooding in to take over our democracy and rig our democratic system.
Yeah. Well, the facts don't matter. I mean, this has been decades and decades in the making, where Fox News and conservative talk radio were promoting these lies. And when you bring math to MAGA, they don't look at it and do it. They just say, I don't care because I want to believe what I want to believe. And, when it's built on the back of racism and xenophobia and fear, right? That is what this is based on. And I think the biggest thing that people misunderstand about MAGA's fear of immigrants is it's a fear of humiliation. It's a fear of feeling stupid. When they hear someone speaking a language that they don't understand, they feel afraid because they're so narcissistic that they assume that the Spanish speaking waitress or busboy must be talking about them as if it would matter if that was the truth, right? I say this because this is the way I used to feel back when I was a kid and didn't understand. I still don't understand a lot of Spanish, but I used to listen to conservative talk show hosts, like back when Glenn Beck was drawing on his chalkboard on Fox News. And that kind of fear of the unknown is something that is difficult for us to reason with, because they're not going to look at the math, right? And if their inherent, like, deep guttural fear of immigrants is just part of who they are, it makes it really difficult for us to combat Donald Trump's lies and to convince any of his allies that they shouldn't just go along with it.
The one piece of math that will be hard to ignore, and I think so much rests on this, is if we have an overwhelming victory in the midterms, that makes it really hard to cry foul, right? It is one thing for Donald Trump to call Brad Raffensperger, to call the Secretary of State in Georgia, the folks counting the votes, and say, find me 11,000 votes. That leads to a constitutional crisis. It's a different proposition altogether to have to call up secretaries of state and find me 11 million votes. That's an exaggeration. Find me 1 million votes, right?
Yep.
If we win by a massive enough margin, it's going to be a lot tougher for Donald Trump to try to do what he attempted leading up to January 6th.
Yeah. And everyone watching this show has seen this before, right? We all understand what's going on, but there are low information voters who will be swayed if there is some sort of like close call with the election. That's why people should feel encouraged. They shouldn't feel discouraged by this. They shouldn't feel like their vote is not going to count. That is not true. Your vote has never been more important. So I think that people ought to start making plans now, not just to vote, but to do everything that they can to support their local elections. If that means, going to your town clerk and asking them what you can do to sign up and volunteer, like, do that. Because the more of us that actually participate in the function, the machinery of democracy, the more protected our democracy is going to be. We are not, like, we've crossed the Rubicon, right? We're living under an authoritarian regime, but our democracy is not dead yet. It only dies if we all give up. And I'm sure as hell not giving up.
Great note to end on, Chris. Can you tell us what you've got coming up on Offense? We'll put a link in the notes below. Yeah,
the latest episode of On Offense is with an Air Force veteran named Chris Armitage. The guy is an accomplished author, a security expert, and he's been writing things like sample legislation that you listeners can take to your state representatives and demand that they pass laws. One example would be the Epstein Transparency Act. Instead of just worrying about, the feds, how the FBI and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are going to handle the Epstein files, they're just going to keep doing the cover up. Well, if there are 50 state investigations where state attorneys general and district attorney for major cities like New York and Austin and Tampa and Orlando, right? Name a city. If everyone is investigating what is now open source evidence in the Epstein files, we can start going after the people that appear to be guilty, appear to be collaborators with Epstein. And that is going to, potentially take out maybe some Democrats. I don't care. Take out some Republicans. I don't care. The goal is to hold people responsible for the most damning pedophile ring that our world has ever known, right?
That's the real test. If you ask me, when Republicans, like, knee-jerk reaction is, well, are you sure you want to do that? Some Democrats might go down too. And the way you're on the right side is if your answer is absolutely, take them down. Yeah. I don't care which party they belong to. If they've been victimizing kids and young women, take them out. And you just don't have that gut reaction on the right.
Yeah. So, it doesn't need to happen in all 50 states, but Republicans have every bit of it, an incentive to go after their Democratic opponents if they think that the Democrats are going to be the ones most affected by the Epstein files. Democrats obviously have the same incentive. So this should be, something that could potentially pass before the end of the year in multiple states, open up multiple investigations. And there are other countries, France, Norway, Sweden, the UK have all opened their own investigations into the Epstein files. We should be collaborating internationally, follow the law and share what testimony they can and share whatever evidence they can gather, because this is something that touched on a large part of the world. There were people trafficked from countries all over the place, kids trafficked from countries all over the place. And we, as citizens, we have every right and every duty to demand justice at the local level too, to make sure that if there's any sort of jurisdictional hook in your state or your town, your city, your county, whatever, that you are working to make sure that those who represent you in office are fighting for justice. We don't have to wait on Congress. We don't have to wait on a new DOJ or a new FBI director. We can do this in 50 states all across the country. So that's the current episode of On Offense. Next up, I'm going to have one of our preeminent journalists who studies the far right, Phil Williams. He's gone face to face with the Goyim Defense League, swastika flying neo-Nazis. And he's done a lot to expose how neo-Nazis are actually working with Republicans in Tennessee.
Awesome. We'll put links to all of it down below, Chris. Great having you.
Thanks, brother.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.